someone's opinion on, or like beliefs.
And clearly we've seen religious people who have very destructive motives,
Yes.
right? Very terrible motives, right? So clearly it's not religion that saves you, but it's, you know, maybe your own consciousness, your own guilt and shame that you might feel. Oh no, it's not a video, it's like an article. We could click this, honestly. Okay. This is it's a bit of an old article, 2017. So you kids were all wee back then, right? Like you were little. Okay. It's about so 2017. I don't know how much has changed, but you know, part of that stewardship. So let's say you remove religion, you just look at globalization. You just look at like making our products, right? Because like, I won't lie, kids. I have an iPhone, right? It's a iPhone 11. When did iPhone 11 come out?
4 years.
4 years ago. So 2 years after this article was written, right? So it's very likely that the cobalt, the material from this in this iPhone, you know, came from some very rough circumstances. Apple has announced, this was in 2017, that it will temporarily, so just for a short bit, suspend buying hand-mined cobalt in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Congo has a very rough history of colonization and their attempts at I forget, there's a particular specific word for it, but removing their colonial government and establishing their own government. They had a civil war there as well, some assassinations of some people who were trying to do some good things perhaps. So Congo is a very rough place on earth. There's not a lot of infrastructure. They have a really low quality of life, low health, low average age that people live to. Okay, they're very poor, right? So for many people in Congo, this might be a good opportunity, but you know, from Apple, in terms of stewardship and taking care of people, think about it in that way. So they temporarily suspend buying hand-mined cobalt in the Republic of Congo, less than a week after the publication of a Sky News investigation, which chronicled the brutal slave conditions and child labor in cobalt mines there. It's a precious metal, one of the most precious materials in the world for the tech industry. It's an indispensable component of the rechargeable lithium-ion batteries that run smartphones and laptops. A majority of the world's supplies found in Congo, one of the poorest countries in the world. Okay. Reports that major corporations such as Apple, Sony, and Samsung use cobalt sourced from so-called artisanal mines. I was explaining this yesterday, which are small-scale, maybe to the grade 9, small-scale mines where workers use most basic tools. There's little to no labor regulations. In 2016, Amnesty International released a report that demonstrated how these companies fail to do even basic checks to ensure that child labor isn't being used to extract the cobalt they use for their products. The report also found that no country requires companies to regulate or publicly disclose information about their cobalt supply chain. So again, coming down to stewardship, like let's say you're a company, right? So let's say you are a manager of something, or a leader or a boss, whatever. The people underneath you are still under your responsibility and care, and how you treat them is just as important as whatever outcome or result you get, whatever you're trying to do. Right? In fact, that might be more important than the result. And so, you know, how many of us have iPhones out of curiosity? Okay. Like, more than half of us, because some of us are sleeping, right? Now, I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty, right? But it is something to consider from a company's perspective, like Apple. Should they be careless about the lives of the humans that they impact in the process of making their phones, right? Imagine if that was you working in a mine rather than, you know, sleeping in social class, doing nothing, right? And like, just going back, I mean, look at this picture. Like, I don't know how deep those mines go. That doesn't look very fun. It looks very sketchy. I don't know, any of you claustrophobic? Quite a bit of you. How would you feel being in that tiny little hole? Like, not good. I imagine, right?
I feel like most company people, like businessmen, wouldn't really care about the people or like where they get the resources. I feel like they just mainly care about the money they're making out of it. And the only reason why they would change it is like if people found out where they're getting the resources and what it has to go through, like what people have to go through.
Right? That's that first excerpt right there. The only reason they temporarily stopped doing this is because a report came out making them look terrible.
Like Nike and their
Right.
sweatshops.
Nike did something similar, right? And you know, it is worth asking, like, how much do we really care in our day-to-day lives? You know, again, I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but it is something over time that ideally, as an individual, you start to think more about, right? The impact you have on the people around you, right? The choices you make have an impact on people around you as well. Whoa, look at this. Sky News investigation found children as young as 4 years old working in the mines. Holy. So that little babysitting kid we were just referring to earlier, who didn't die but did break their arm. Imagine they're in a mine instead. Now you're responsible for them. Okay. Pay equivalent to around $0.10 a day. $0.10 for a day's worth of back-breaking labor. Do you guys know what a dime is?
A coin, 10 cents.
It's 10 cents. How many of you were upset when you found out that, like, there's a difference, like you don't have to pay people under the age of 18 $15 an hour, do you? Any of you have jobs? Okay, some of the kids who are in grade 12, we had this discussion a couple of years ago. They're very upset that they're getting paid $2 less than people of a different age. Imagine getting paid 10 cents for like 12 hours of work. Now, I don't know what that 10 cents gets them, where they're from, but it's clearly, like, you know, something to be cautious about. One of the biggest companies that pulls out cobalt is a Chinese company. I'm not going to bother trying to say the name. They're the largest buyer of artisanal cobalt in the DRC and supplies most of the world's biggest battery makers, including Apple. So, you know, Apple's kind of keeping its hands clean by saying, well, we're not the ones with the mine. We're just buying a finished product. Maybe they're trying to say, take it up with that company. We're just looking for a source for our batteries. This article is not too long. We'll read the rest of it. Last year, Apple pledged that it would step up scrutiny of its cobalt supply chain, but said it wouldn't halt purchases. It said it was concerned that cutting off the artisanal mines that the cobalt that this company buys from would be too blunt of a tool to use, since it would end up causing miners to lose jobs. Apple's logic, presumably, was that exploring ways to enhance regulation was the best way to thread the needle between taking the minerals with no questions asked and boycotting the mines. That was its public claim. There was also the reality that cutting off a major supply of cobalt, can you close the door there? Thank you. That was its public claim. There was also the reality that cutting off a major supply of cobalt was likely disruptive to business. So it's tough to really say exactly what they're doing. Like, on one end, they're saying, well, if you just stop buying any of the products, all these people do lose a job, right? Which is something worth considering. But at the same time, you know, they're very concerned about their own business that they're conducting. God forbid we skip having an Apple phone released every year, right? The minor changes to the camera and the look, and major changes to the price tag. So how do you essentially help this country to have better regulations, to treat people better, right? Like, how do you slowly improve a culture that exists? Because if you just do it rapidly and you say overnight, like, well, you need to make 10 of these changes. I mean, the DRC doesn't exactly have strong infrastructure, strong government to just make those changes overnight. And potentially that other company that's owned by a different country, they might not care, right? They might break the law anyway, right? But how do you slowly help improve people's lives? Let's see. So they've stopped buying cobalt from these mines for the moment. We have been working with, I don't know how to say that, on a program that will verify individual artisanal mines according to our standards. These mines will re-enter our supply chain when we are confident that the appropriate protections are in place. Right? So there's also an opportunity here for someone to say, okay, like I'm going to open up a mine with good equipment and better working conditions and practices, and hopefully then other companies will resort to my mine for their materials. Right? You know, wherever there's wherever that responsibility has been abdicated, an opportunity exists there for someone to do what might be considered the right thing, should they choose, right? But people are, free to make that decision. Apple says it will coordinate with local groups to improve working conditions and end child labor. According to the Post, it's also said that it will begin to treat cobalt the way it does other conflict minerals. Have you ever heard of this phrase, conflict minerals? Or conflict diamonds? Have you ever heard the phrase blood diamonds? Some of you might have watched this movie. It's kind of based on this concept, blood diamond.
I didn't watch the movie, but I did hear blood diamond a couple of times. I don't know what it means, I just heard people say it.
Blood diamonds or conflict diamonds just refers to the fact that a lot of the minerals that come out of Africa are usually, like a lot of the mines, they have child labor, they have borderline slave labor, they have no labor laws, no real solid working conditions, very horrible, and potentially a lot of violence and a lot of death, right? Which is kind of what